Hello, welcome back. It's been another busy time, but here we are about a week and a half later, and today we're going to talk about the Mephisto Waltz. The Mephisto Waltz was produced and distributed by 20th Century Fox. Now, you probably remember I said that in 1970 there was only one movie that was one Hollywood produced and distributed American movie in the whole year as far as horror goes, and that was House of Dark Shadows. That was produced and distributed by MGM. Here is a Fox movie, 20th Century Fox, and they didn't have any horror movies in 1970. In fact, a couple interesting stats in this area are that depending on what you consider a horror movie, if my sources are correct, they hadn't put out a horror movie since 1963. They put out a movie called House of the Damned. I haven't seen it yet. In 1964, they put out this movie called Hush, Hush, Sweet Charlotte, but I know that was influenced and also produced by the same production company that did Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, which I do not consider a horror movie. I would say that's a thriller, so I'm not sure if we can count that. House of the Damned was not produced by Fox. We'd have to go back even further. In 1962, Fox produced and released the remake of The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, which is a German film from the silent era. Anyway, as I have been saying in other videos, horror was not very popular at this time. However, Rosemary's Baby, that Paramount put out in 1968, was popular, and this is kind of in the same vein as that. In fact, I read that the producer of this movie paid like $250,000 to get the rights to the novel that this was based on, because he was hoping for another Rosemary's Baby type hit. So anyway, this movie, actually, I was thinking, besides the obvious subgenres like vampires or werewolves or supernatural or slasher or whatever, there's also kind of like another, what I would call maybe a tertiary genre that we see in horror movies. And in this case, I would call this a piano horror movie or a musical horror movie. Not that it's a musical with singing, but the plot is based around musicians. So other movies that come into mind are like Phantom of the Opera, The Hands of Dr. Orlock, or The Hands of Orlock. I don't think he was a doctor, he was a piano player. There's some other ones too. So anyway, this is all about a guy who is a musical journalist. He's played by Alan Alda, who is most famous for being in the TV show MASH, which actually started, I think, a year after this. So this was a relatively early role for him, the only horror movie he ever did. Anyway, he's a musical journalist. He goes to interview a famous pianist who's like in his 70s or something like that, and ailing. Well, it turns out that this pianist is also a Satanist, and he and his daughter perform satanic magic to put his soul into the journalist's body. It is one of those movies where you don't know if like the magic is real or not at first. Spoiler alert, it ends up being real. So they use this like weird blue liquid to like do spells. And they put a pentagram, you can see it right there on the poster. They put a pentagram on the floor in this blue liquid, and then they put the blue liquid on Alan Alda's forehead, and then it kind of like slowly puts this pianist's soul into his body. The reason he does this is because during the interview, the pianist notices that the journalist has really great hands. Really great piano hands. The journalist actually said he had gone to college for 4 years to be a pianist, but then decided like not to do it because he had a unhappy experience in an early concert that he played. Anyway, the thing about this movie, and I would give it a 6 out of 10. It's the production is very nice. Everything looks nice. The acting's fine. Maybe better than fine. It's like proficient. It's satisfactory. There's no performance here that really jumps out, which this kind of a movie needs a really good performance. You can tell they were trying to get good performances because from what I understand, the actors in this movie were like well known, probably outside of horror. But it's really slow, and it feels like it's all building up to something cool that's going to happen at the end. And then I didn't really think the end was very cool. So I'm not going to spoil it beyond that. But I will say, if you notice here, there is, well, you can't really probably tell on your screen, but that is a dog with a human face. And there is one scene that stuck out to me where it's like a costume party and all the people are dressed up as animals. Lion, goat, whatever. And the dog has a human mask on. That was probably the most unsettling thing in the whole movie. Probably not intended to be, although they did put it on the poster, so maybe they did realize what they had there. And I looked it up, and that is a William Shatner mask. And I didn't know this until today, but apparently the Halloween mask, like Michael Myers' mask in Halloween, is also a William Shatner mask. And this is the same mask. I didn't know that. I mean, I'm assuming that what I read is correct, but that was pretty interesting. So anyway, this one gets a 6 out of 10. It had a cool soundtrack, a cool score. Jerry Goldsmith did it. He went on to do a lot more famous ones. He did, let's see, I think he did Gremlins, he did Poltergeist, he did Planet of the Apes, which actually came out before this. I think he did Jurassic Park 2, The Lost World. And I guess he created one of Universal's fanfare, like when you see it say Universal on the screen, the little music that plays there. He created the late 90s Universal fanfare. I don't know how long that lasted. Years, though. And he did the Paramount home video fanfare, which I'm not sure I know what that is. I've probably seen it, but I can't think of it at the moment. So anyway, that's the Mephisto Waltz. Part of why it took me so long to make this video is because I went through these other movies on this giant horror list that I work off of, and I would not consider these other movies horror movies, so let's quickly mention them and why they're not horror in my not so professional opinion. Okay, there was this one, which was a French film. The title translates to N Took the Dice. N is the narrator. I'm pretty sure that's why he calls himself N in this movie. This movie is I guess we could call it a remix of Eden and After. There's Eden and After. Oops, let's see. There's Eden and After. That's like a poster plus some images. This is a French film about these like college kids that like play these weirdo, dangerous games like Russian roulette, but with no bullet, and you're not shooting yourself, but you're shooting your friend. But like, it's really abstract and really artsy, and I would call it a thriller, like a psychological thriller. I wouldn't call it a horror film. There's no killer, there's no supernatural element, there's really no element of fear. There's more element of suspense, which is why I would call it a thriller. And then this is mostly the same movie, except like shot with extra scenes and then like other scenes taken out, and I think maybe some scenes in out of order, or maybe like an alternate camera, like an unused camera angle from the first film, but like, you know, they used an alternate angle so you can tell it's like the same scene but it's from a different perspective. Interesting, but not horror. And also not like it was interesting like when I go into a museum and look at a painting that's really abstract and I can't tell what it is. It's interesting in that way, except I don't want to look at a painting like that for like 80 minutes. And this got to be that for me. I just couldn't really stick with it. Anyway, the other one is this, which I thought definitely would be a horror film. It's called Il Sesso del Diavolo, which in Italian means the sex of the devil. And I thought there would be some devil sex, but, you know, it's more like a metaphor. I guess we could call this a giallo, but it's like a really lame one. Not horror. It's more just like a mystery. These people go to Turkey. These Italian people go to Turkey, and they stay in this place where like a girl had hanged herself, and then like I felt like half the movie went by, and they're like, "Oh, did she really hang herself, or was she murdered?" And then they were like incorporating like zodiac signs into it, and you know, by the end of the movie, you see like 2 people get hanged or something like that. That's about it. Not very exciting. All right. So anyway, that was the Mephisto Waltz, 6 out of 10. Hopefully I can get the next one up within a week. See you then.